Welcome to another episode of the InfoTech Growth Partner Podcast, the podcast where the future of IT unfolds and we dive deep into the pertinent developments in regards to IT and data with leaders and experts in the IT consulting field. My name is Jasper, and today I have the pleasure to have Henry Cipriano in the show. Henry is a Vice President of Global Alliances and Partnerships at Flexxible. And, well, it's really an honor to have you on the show, Henry. Welcome.
No, Jasper, thanks for having me on. I'm kind of excited to discuss digital transformation, what we do, and what's going on in the industry. It's an exciting time.
Great to hear. Great to hear. And for the listeners, for the viewers, can you give us a little bit of introduction to your own background, to what Flexxible does, of course, and what your role within the company is?
Sure. So prior to Flexxible, I had worked for IBM, and then the split off from that called Kyndryl for almost 13 plus years. From there, then I made the move over to Flexxible. Flexxible is a Spain-based company. And at the end of the day, think about a digital workspace environment that your IT can manage all of the end user experiences from, whether it's automated desktop as a service, onboarding, offboarding, analytics, security data, kind of the complete picture of the end users, their devices, the infrastructure to maintain it, manage it. So your level 1, 2, and 3 support teams can do that. So we basically sell a SaaS-based solution, a couple of different flavors, a couple of different types of products there. And we actually had the honor this past year of being introduced into the Desktop as a Service Gartner Magic Quadrant that we're on and hoping to maintain and grow for the future. So that's a high level of what we do. We can get deeper into the piece parts of it, but just think of a complete digital workspace platform portal to manage all of your end user experience needs.
Well, thank you. And something that stood out to me, I think something that you mentioned earlier was that you can, or your clients can manage hundreds of users, which is 1 or 2 people, which I think is a very good testament of showing the value of that desktop as a service offering that you have.
Yeah, I go one, or I'd say thousands of users. You could manage thousands of users, and we work not just directly with end user clients and enterprises, but also through global service integrators. So those GSIs can have 1 or 2 support teams managing multiple clients from a single portal and a single platform. I mean, that's where the productivity gains and cost gains, and it's automated. And honestly, at times I find, having worked for IBM and done delivery in the digital workplace services space, I find it was better at times than our regular day-to-day support teams, because you're not having to pay somebody to look at it. There's an automated set of what's going on, automatic alerts. You can automatically have it fix the problem before it comes to fray. I mean, that proactive approach is the key to increasing productivity and increasing the end user experience. The less your end user is calling up IT saying, this is broken, that's broken. I look at IT, I always say it should be like air. Right? You don't think about it, it's there. If it's not there, things fall apart, break down, everybody's upset, things go crazy. But if your IT can be like air and no one complains and says, oh yeah, my IT works great. The next level of that is, does my IT help me achieve industry agility? And we can get into the piece parts of what we do to allow that as well for the enterprise.
Yeah, and I want to touch upon that a little bit, as like, of course, based on your experience in companies like IBM, like Kyndryl, looking at your viewpoint on IT sort of being the enabler of the business, and something, well, just the analogy that you just mentioned of it being like air. Of course, most companies are and have been dealing with the term digital transformation. But based on your experience, your perspective, can you tell us a little bit of what you think it's actually about and how companies should think and act on digital transformation?
Yeah, I think a lot of companies got thrust into digital transformation, whether they liked it or not, from the pandemic. There was a point in time where VDI, which is a piece part of some of this virtual desktop infrastructure, was kind of going down. People were trying to figure out where they're going to be for the enterprise level. But once you hit the pandemic and you realize you're going to have all these workers working remotely, companies have been struggling to figure out, how do I deliver the apps, what devices are acceptable, what processes are in place legally for us to allow this to do. So that kind of forced that to happen, whether for schools, for enterprises, and it exposed a lot of failings with many companies in governments and enterprises, whether it's around network security, compliance, endpoints that can support and not support different applications, or the applications web-based, mobile, etc. And so, when you think about companies going through digital transformation, the failings, the problems they run into is that it's unfortunately sometimes gets put into, well, this is an IT problem for this business unit, or it's an application problem. And it really needs to be end to end across the enterprise and driven from the top down. If it's not from the top down, all that starts to happen is one guy has a little budget to fix a little thing. And that little thing might have other implications that you didn't think about to go ahead and do it. So when you get into these digital transformation discussions, simple things like, do you need a desktop? Like I've done tons of discussions when I was at IBM. I'm into Kindle saying, do you really need a desktop? Like when I open up my phone, I don't open a desktop, right? I open up an app. So really you look at it from the point of, I look at it from the point of view of I need access to apps and data anywhere, anytime on any device or form factor. If that's the case, then you have to start to understand, well, what does a day in the life of your end user look like, right? And what exactly do they need to do their job? Some, we're conditioned over time to having a laptop or some type of large monitor or desktop because that's just what we've lived with. Now, some of the millennials and younger, they're kind of used to playing with apps or doing something a little bit less than what the older generations, Gen X, Gen Y, are used to doing. And so in that case, you have to figure out, well, how do I, across the enterprise, get something that meets everybody's needs? And that's where choice comes in. Like one of the big things we pushed at IBM, Hydra, was choice for the end users. And so actually at IBM, we were much ready for a pandemic. We were already working remotely. Right? Everything we had done was designed around that. From the endpoint, you had a choice. You can have a Mac, you can have a laptop that's a Microsoft based or whatever. And so there was a lot of thoughts. You can bring your own device as you kind of go through that process. And so from a digital transformation, clients have to start to think about, well, what do I need? When do I need it? And how do I need it? That's a large undertaking. It really says, what's a day in the life of your end user? And that gets into a discussion about persona development. When you think about personas of end users, one of the big fails that we always see with enterprises is they tend to say, well, this is an accounting group, that's a persona. No, that's not a persona. You could have a persona that could cut across all the different business units, all different platforms. It might not be in accounting, it might be marketing, but they might do similar things and need similar devices or access to similar applications. And when you start to do that, you can build in other important points of safety around security, layers of security that start at the network, the application, the device. And when you start layering that in, you get things like the ability to protect from travel that's not possible. Meaning, I see a laptop that you own opening up in India, and a device you're working on that I know is company wide in California. How can that happen? Like, what's going on? So now the security alert. So you start to layer and block out different applications, different things. It also allows you to deliver faster. And this is where the move to the cloud and digital transformation starts to come in, saying, when I move to the cloud, I don't want to just take a laptop and shove it in the cloud. I need to look at what's on that laptop, what's in that image, what's in that underlying set of applications. There are many times we do assessments and you see clients with hundreds and hundreds of applications inside their image. The end user that they have touches 20 of them, right? And so that's a lot of space. If I'm going to put that into the cloud, I'm paying for the CPU, for the processing power, for the storage, all of those elements that go into it. So those are some of the high level examples of just how do you start to think about transforming to deliver a better productivity for your end user. So the end user experience, talk about experience level agreements that we've been I was pushing for decades, saying, listen, service level agreements are great, but experience level agreements are really where the end user is concerned. Whether a server is up and down, which is really where SLAs start to get into, like time to recovery. Well, if your end user is never impacted by any of that, what does it matter? Great, you get a fee from our company because that server was down for 4 minutes, and should have been up in 2. Okay, but the end users never saw an impact. And so when you get to delivering experience level agreements, where you say, well, how do I measure experience? And that's a little tricky. This is where it gets a little tough for companies. You're splitting quantitative and qualitative information. The quantitative is easy. I can measure CPU, RAM, time up, time down. But the qualitative is going to be a little tougher. That's where the end user can start to say, well, I feel bad or I don't feel good, despite whatever the numbers might show about their desktop, they may not be happy. Right? Well, why is that? What's going on? And you got to come up with a way to measure and kind of put that together. So there's a lot of companies out there that have been, and especially Flexxible, develop these productivity measurements or user experience measurements with different weighting factors, different heuristics to be able to deliver that. And part of it's the ability to deliver a quick, simple survey to an end user on their device or desktop. Says, are you happy? Smiley face to frowny face, your net promoter score type approach. Kind of like when you go to the bathroom in the airport, walking out, this was great, this was not so great,
Yep.
What's going on there. That gives you a high level start, and you can dig into it in the future if you want to dig a bit deeper. A lot of times these qualitative surveys come after an incident. Well, if somebody puts in a ticket and then it's after the incident, they're probably not going to be happy. Because it got resolved, but I was unhappy that it happened, right? Versus something that's measuring all your end users and delivering a score that says, on average, X amount of users don't have a problem, or we proactively solved these problems before it became a ticket. Or there was an automation in place that the minute we saw whatever is special build up in this application, we cleared the cache or something along those lines. And that's something actually that our platform allows to do, those automations, those pieces of the pie. And kind of jumping a bit forward is that look at what's the future, where things are going. So as you start to introduce AI in the ability to start thinking about, well, what are end users looking for, or what are they going to need? And so proactively providing that access or preemptively providing it quicker connection is the key pieces of that digital transformation. I kind of went off on a tangent there. I apologize. But I think I touched all the main factors. Let me know if you want to dig deeper into it.
Definitely. No, thank you for that. And I think what just can summarize it is more drilling down on the individual end user, understanding what is it that they need instead of just putting people into buckets and thinking that this is what they need or what they want. Some things I'm thinking about, like from a company perspective, of course, it requires resources and time in order to understand their end users, in order to make sure that the experience of either of the users are specifically for them. Can you tell us a little bit about when there's a lack of financial resources in a company, or a lack of, I think something you touched upon already, top-down push in order to pursue these digital transformation initiatives?
Yeah, a lot of times this happens a lot more in government. Government, a lot of times they have a budget that's specific to a year or the election cycle of the current administration or something along those lines. So they want to spend the money or do something in that time period. So they're not looking long term. For enterprises, a lot of times similar situations, the top down guys, listen, they're going to make a decision that type of investment in transformational, that's their job. Right? If something goes wrong, they're going to probably lose their job. So a lot of times what you have to do is build a case, build the story around the 5 and 10 year returns on what you're doing. And I like to look at, we had a discussion in the past called TEI, Total Economic Impact. Yep. Forrester Research uses this quite a bit. TEI to me is an interesting format, because basically would say this: if you believe what I'm saying has to happen, that economic transformation or digital transformation, it doesn't happen overnight. You can't just snap your fingers and it goes down. Many times there's a parallel process going on. There's the building of the new and the running of the old, right? So what you want in a total economic impact study of sorts, or a case you build out around that, you want to understand at what point do I go from the old to the new, where my investments start to return for me, in one form or another, whether it's rolling off leases I have on existing devices, decommissioning existing data centers, moving to the cloud. When do those costs positive? And you know what? In some cases, it might not go positive. It might be that we made all this transformation and nothing got better. Nothing happened. I can do the same exact thing. If that's the case, I wouldn't do it. Obviously, it'd be a question of, do you want to be industry agile? Now, in most cases, if you're doing a digital transformation, total economic impact will show there is a positive side of that. Now, is that happening in 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years? That's really the question. And that then starts to figure out, well, what are the projects I need to lay out to get to that digital transformation, the true digital transformation? Because again, a lot of times it's not just one thing. There are multiple parts of the business that have to transform to get to that full end user experience. What I always see, the first things that are always should be addressed are network and security. Network, when you move to the cloud, again, we all saw this during the pandemic. You probably saw it in your house, right? When everybody in your house suddenly turns on all the devices and they're working, and one's in school and one's in this, everything slows down. I had to put a 1 gig network and a mesh network into my house to be able to support what was going on, knowing what was coming down the road. Well, companies have to do the same thing. They have to make, what type of network connection do you have? Then there's also a question around data sovereignty. In Europe, this comes up quite a bit. So some stuff can't move to the cloud. It's going to still sit in the existing either data center on-prem, colo, within country. And you look at DR as well, disaster recovery, you got to be within, say, 250 miles of one data center to another. All those network connectivity starts to question speed of light. I mean, that's really what the network is going down the path of discussing. And there's different ways to increase that, to offload some of that in the beginning or the end, at the edge. Tons of different solutions out there that we come across and can be integrated into your total digital transformation. But those are the factors you got to figure out. Again, do you need if you have 20,000 users, do all 20,000 users need to be on at the same time? Most likely not. Do they require this level of connectivity all the time? Most likely not. But when you start to understand who is, when, why, how, timing, you can start to build a full solution. And that's that total economic impact study. How do I get there? What's the first priority to go down that path of? Again, networks, what I see, security. A lot of times security policies, not even the technology, policies within companies are lacking to allow true digital transformation. Like, what devices can you use? Right? Are you allowed to bring your own device? Does the company security feel that's secure? That's where you get into things like VDI or applications that are virtualized, being able to, or on the web or whatever, or in a device, mobile apps, accessing those devices in a more secure fashion than just running them natively on a physical device that's installed and running there, right? And so those are the many different pieces of the pie that you have to go through. Now, application transformation on its own, whether it's cloud native development, mobile based, whether it can run multiple browsers as the browsers update, multiple mobile device browsers that you go through. Those are all considerations and all processes that you kind of have to figure out, and they're tough. There's many companies that I've come across covering the globe that they have applications that were built by some guy named Joe who liked the Red Sox, and he died. And he named all of his coding based on players he knew. Well, the company's very afraid to touch or patch that app because it might break and it might be key or pivotal to the company. So they can build in parallel something else or try to extract it, but there's always the fear that if that goes down, our business is over. And which is another reason for digital transformation and the move to the cloud, and move to separate these apps and run them. That's where you see growth in Salesforce and all of these large ERP and process companies, is that their ability to deliver that app experience and fine-tune to the enterprise needs is key. Now, the discussion about cost and price, the limiting factors. A lot of times, if it's not top-down driven, the little guy who's running his IT manager says, I was told to do this. So he does that. But you may find out in another year he's going to do something else because transformation never achieved it fixed that problem that day that they were looking at. But no one said, listen, before you do that, if your company's going down the path of getting to here, you should probably look at a different end-to-end, more holistic discussion about how we transform. And that's what we tried to do when I was at IBM Kyndryl and even now Flexxible. We try to say, looking at what are the apps, what do they do, where are you trying to put them, why have you built it that way? Because a lot of the norms of how you build a data center or how you stand up applications don't always apply as new technology comes out. Technology used to be like a 2-year process to roll out. Now it's months, literally months. 2 to 6 months, you have new technology that could transform, especially with AI, that can transform what you're doing. So I'll stop. I'm just kind of roll there.
No. and that's actually something I want to dive deeper on. That the last thing that you mentioned, like, of course, there's a lot of new technologies constantly evolving. The space is constantly evolving, but companies are pretty hesitant to touch their core infrastructure, their core IT. How would you from your perspective, how would you think that companies should balance the, let's say, sort of fear of failure in innovating and changing their core tech infrastructure, but also the opportunities that lie there within those new technologies?
So you gotta have your low hanging fruit, right? So most companies should have a general how we want to transform and a roadmap to get there. Along the line, if new technology comes up, what you want to be looking at is, okay, let's test this out in this subset of users or these pieces. And that's what companies really have to do is they got to be having their own sandbox of sorts with a set of users that understand this is new technology. It could benefit you greatly. And the ability to flip them back to their normal state, we'll say, versus this new enhanced state is going to be available. But you have to be running that level of, and that's an investment, right? Having that level of a sandbox or a transformational, we'll call it, site kind of going on. That's the only way to get there. I mean, no one goes big bang and just flips the switch and we're all there, right? You're testing it out. You have to. You have major corporations. You have impact to end users and productivity across the board. But you have to constantly be looking to innovate, because if you're not, your competition is, right. Your competition is absolutely going to innovate. If you go back when I was in college, you've read the book Good to Great. It talks about all the companies, like how they've been around for so long. Read that book again and see if those companies still exist, right? You'd be surprised the ones that were great that aren't here anymore, or are slowly not at the top of the food chain anymore. And the reason is just innovation and transformation. I mean, just a thought about this. Think of BlackBerry. BlackBerry was leading the charge, right? And then iPhone went past it. They had a chance to be the iPhones of the day, and they missed it. They didn't transform. They didn't make that next use. And there's still a lot of BlackBerry enterprise service, BES service, that we're still unloading in many enterprises that are there. They're trying to get off that, right, and move to something different. And so that's a great example of disruptive technology or creative destruction that kind of occurs throughout the industry. I see it accelerating. When things have transformed from going from mainframes to endpoints to kind of mainframes and cloud-based. It's the same idea. It's still data. It's a data center, and you're still running CPU, RAM, and still ones and zeros. There's nothing drastically changing there. We haven't made that move to like a DNA computer. There is discussions on quantum computing and all those fun stuff that comes up. That's great. That's processing power. But all that comes with the transformational process to get there. Because many apps and many enterprises aren't designed to take it all on at once. I mean, a high-level network discussion is the move from 3G to 4G to 5G as you go down that path. Many things. I remember about 2-3 years ago, like I got a note from the cell phone company I have. Hey, listen, if you don't transfer your phone to like a 5G phone by January, it's not going to work. Right? I was kind of like you had like a year or two to get off of it, but it was kind of saying, listen, all those old phones you have, they're not going to work anymore. We're all moving to this network, and you're going to be there. And unfortunately, that's a lot of what you have to drive in your business, because there will always be those legacy users that are just unwilling to transform. When I first started at IBM, I was a project manager. I got brought in to fix a troubled project for a media. I won't mention the company, but in that process, we had taken the IT was being run by IBM, and the transformation to his VDI solution. The biggest people who we had problems with were not the company's employees; they were ours at IBM, transforming to use the VDI that we wanted the way. Because what happens is we started to uncover they had been former employees of the company, and they came into IBM when we bought them out, and they had access to things that they shouldn't have had access to. So one thing that gets uncovered when you start to give people a desktop based on their persona and their needs is you lock things down. You remove the access to stuff that they shouldn't have had. I wasn't taking something away. It's something they should never have had to begin with. They were taking advantage of it because it's something that they had been used to having in their previous roles. Right. And believe it or not, that feels like I'm stealing their children and ripping them out of their hands, taking it away. They're very upset. Like there was tons of meetings where people were upset and screaming and protesting. I'm like, I need this. I don't need that. And I'm like, it's not me. To be fair, if you need that access, apply and prove it to the appropriate security folks. It's not for me to decide. I'm rolling out a solution based on those needs. But that's a good example though of saying, has somebody gone through and figured out, well, what do they actually need to do their job? If you're demanding they use this way, you got to give them the appropriate access to do that as well.
Those are some good examples that you put out in in your last point. It's getting back to that end user, actually understanding what they need instead of just someone from the top down or a manager that just had an initiative and thinks this is something relevant that the company should do. I think that is the main point that people should take away from, well, digital transformation and large transformations and projects. One thing I want to end with sort of is, you mentioned like innovation, that you see that innovation is accelerating in the last couple of years, obviously with AI, those types of things. Can you touch upon that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the ability to build apps natively. I mean, I'll take an example of Microsoft stuff. Look at Power Platform. The ability for the citizen developer, we'll call it, you or I'm not a developer. I did a little bit of code writing when I was getting my second master's, but I don't write code. Through things like Power Platform, through those different tool sets, I can start to take that data and work with it. You get into AI, you can write code for somebody just by natively talking it out. Hey, suddenly your marketing team can develop and build an entire new platform for the end user's customer relationship management and pump out information based on data. Or think about an insurance company. Phone call comes in for a claim. As they're doing their claim, they know more about that end user. Hey, by the way, do you need a life insurance policy? And they can see that this guy's prime for it. So that ability to start to build out and take information and flush it out in different formats is amazing. I mean, we were starting to touch on it a bit just before Love Control, but you see it accelerating. I think AI is exciting right now. It's showing productivity gains, but it's not really met its potential. It's still 2 to 5 years from delivering, amazing things is what I would say, right? Right now, it's just interesting and flashy and exciting. And we got big companies like NVIDIA driving tons of money in the marketplace. And we see Microsoft in the fray and Google and Amazon delivering on their AI every time you touch it. You got Copilot rolling out within pieces of your own, Word, desktop, things like that. So it's interesting, exciting. Touch Chat BTD. I want to rewrite a resume. I'm in college. I got a final coming. I want to write a paper. So some of those things are exciting and interesting, but are they game changing? Did they suddenly change the way work happens? In one way they do. So if you are a worker who spent a lot of your time doing, I wouldn't say tedious work, but work with that was kind of mundane and was just crunching it out, you probably don't have a job anymore because AI will start to take that over because it's mundane. It's paying somebody with benefits, and it's not to be mean. I don't want people to lose jobs, but paying someone with benefits and that to do something that can happen 24/7, 7 hours, 24/7, 7 days a week without anybody watching it or taking it. That's good from a productivity perspective for a company.
Definitely,
bad for the end user, which means you have to change your skill sets, right? Exactly. So this leads into constantly learning, changing for the future, learning new and exciting things. And that's the nature of IT, I think, in life in general. You should constantly want to learn, take in new things and take it on. But that's through digital transformation. That's kind of the uptick in technology that I see happening. It's affecting everything, right? People went down the road. I have a house that's most of my house is for smart devices, right? If I start to introduce AI a bit more into my smart devices, what could that mean? I can identify I've got a coyote that's wandering around. It's picking up on 6 or 7 different cameras, and I know where it's going to be. I know what it's going to do. I can alert local police and animal authorities to catch it and remove it because it might be dangerous or might pick something up. That's just a high-level, off-the-cuff thought of what AI can start to do when it starts to take that information in. From the perspective, I think financial services look at it in a very interesting way. Like, okay, how do I pick the right bids? Where do I make the right investments? Where's the next big change coming? What do you think's happening here and here? All those are exciting. Now, there's the downside I see of all this because bad information in delivers bad information out, right? and all this discussion about who's coding, are they woke or not woke, they have a left leaning or a right leaning discussion and how they write that code. All of that affects it's not unbiased, and that's going to be the hardest part of transformation. And I think in AI is achieving unbiased output. People try
Yeah.
hard, but by human nature, I mean, the X factor in all security is a human, right? At the end of the day, the failures always are human. They're not the machine failed, it's the human failed, right? And when you go through and figure out, well, how do I build artificial intelligence that's human-esque, but unbiased? That's a tough one. Humans are biased by nature, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be some of the tough parts, tough theoretical discussions you kind of get into, is building something that gives an output or gives a response that's not biased one way or another, and deciding that output is de facto right or wrong in some regards. Just
Yeah.
things to ponder. I mean, you see that in some, what was that? It was the Gemini failure where it had the black George Washington all the time, just because that's what they wanted to have, that slant on those pieces of the pie. That's a it's a very obvious example of coding or input that tweaked a discussion, tweaked an answer, and tweaked that. And unfortunately, nowadays, with many of the younger population getting their information and news from online sites that are not news sites, that are just like TikTok or something like that, you're driving people to believe things that may not actually be true. No one did the hard work to validate. When we're in IT and we're building stuff, you got to validate that that's the data that you're looking at is correct. And based on all that validated data, here's the most likely way to proceed. Is it always right? No, because there's a lot of X factors you get into when you're working with humans and rolling things out. As a former project manager, is the known knowns, the unknown knowns, and then the unknown unknowns. The unknown unknowns are the biggest problem for any project, because you don't know what they are until they happen, and you're not sure what's going to happen until they happen, right? So you're always going to be planning for that unknown unknown. And I would say digital transformation in IT, the future of how that technology enhances, the unknown unknowns will be where everyone gets kind of bit in the ass at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is. I don't. I can theorize in some areas where I kind of see it could happen, but and then the only other piece of the pie in all this is bad actors or intentional. For all the good IT delivers, there's those that find the bad that it can deliver. And the thing that scares me the most when I look at my parents or an elderly population is AI's ability to mimic me, right? So much so that you could trick loved ones or people who are, not as up on the technology into doing something, giving something away. And that to me is tragic, right? That's where I've seen just whole lives destroyed because someone came in from a bad actor from whatever country or whatever, and stole something from them.
Yeah.
House, money, whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think with a lot of the good innovations and new technologies, there's also always something bad that comes with it, and that it allows to do as well. So
yeah,
that is really unfortunate.
security will be the key. I think around AI for the future is figuring out how do we secure first, then layer on AI access and all of that. And that's why you see many of the security companies that are popping up in the AI space kind of prospering.
Yeah, yeah. And I was recently reading a book, well, sort of focused on AI in the sense that it analyzed all of the breakthrough technologies and innovations in the past couple of hundreds of years, like electricity, the internet, those types of things. And the thing that you mentioned at the beginning is that AI now has a lot of use cases, a lot of small use cases from a productivity standpoint, those types of things, which really are what they call point solutions. but the actual system-wide solutions are not there yet, and that is something that probably takes a couple of years still in order for that to come to fruition.
Yeah, I mean, AI technically has been around for quite a while. We had it at IBM with Watson, right? We were doing that with our workplace support services. Or anytime you call into a credit card company or any company, I doubt you'll get a human on the first call, right? You're going to get something that's automated. That's low level. It's not generative AI, but it's low level AI. I will say that lately I've been getting a lot of spam phone calls that we call it here, and the phone calls are the same voice, like, "Hi, how you doing, Henry?" And it kind of sounds initially like a human, but I know it's not, because it's the same voice, same accent, same guy every time. And it waits. He's like, oh, okay. Well, here's what we want to do. And that is a version of AI or some record thing that's taking a little step further. Now it's trying to get me to buy solar panels or financial investments or whatever the hell it is that they're promoting. There's kind of a set of 10 that seems to pop up all the time in the U.S. anyway. I apparently need a lot of solar panels, and I need a lot of financial extra money here. So
probably, yeah, they know more than you think. Yeah.
Right. And then listen, you look at Amazon, how it's built its life around the analytics and the heuristics. So high levels, like what pops up on the side, you shopping. Hey, have you checked this out? Or you get an email about things that you might be interested in. And that's an extended version of AI. It's kind of taking analytics and twisting it around to say he would be most likely willing to buy this or buy that. Some of it's interesting. Some of it I might check out because, yeah, you know what, I probably do need that. And that's scary but interesting at the same time, is that they have that much input into anybody. And that's, as more and more systems get integrated and data gets shared, that is always the concern. We have a large concern in the U.S. around our medical records and HIPAA compliance, and now this creates a kind of a dual-edged sword. Yes, you want that separation of that data, right? But the problem becomes when, if you're changing insurance companies or different hospitals and doctors. I have a little insight to me. I have 3 kids, 2 of which are special needs. One is Down syndrome, one is autism. The amount of doctor interactions with insurance, medical, pharmacies, all I go through is exponential. And it is always, I literally have 5 things to do today to call up and fight a bill. This wasn't processed right. This wasn't shared properly. Wrong information. And a lot of it is coding. A lot of it is around that. Hey, if your son has Down syndrome, how does that transfer across to all of your, so they know? And 9 times out of 10, when I make the phone calls and talk to the insurance or whatever, oh, well, this didn't have this coding, so we didn't do that. Or it's a new year and you didn't validate, you have a primary and a second. Like, just things that are so stupid and so mundane. Talk about productivity increases. Insurance companies to their end users could vastly improve the experience around how you know your end user, how you know your client better, so that don't get on the phone call and have to fix this problem. They should, in my opinion, insurance companies should find a way to proactively fix bills, meaning that we got to pay more. They don't want to do this because they have to pay out more, right? So that's going to be maybe them paying more out, but they should shoot to not have to have their end users pay anything, because their insurance may be covered or different covered. If it's not covered, hey, fine, you pay it. But they should be shooting to help the end user find all mechanisms in which to have these whatever covered. I'd say the same thing applies to house buying here in the U.S. Large purchases, the amount of credit checks, background checks, all the stuff you go through, you process to get a loan, to buy the house, to process. Like when I bought a house in like 10, 15 years, but last time I bought the house, it was literally like 50 pages of documents I was signing, on like physically signing in person, sitting down, doing it. And that before that, it was another 2 or 3 months of work effort, more than filing my taxes, it felt like, to get the same set of information that should be out there. So there should be some level of a digital locker that has information that I can unlock that allows healthcare or major purchases like a car, to quickly access it and make the experience better. Does that come with security implications? Yeah, if a bad actor gets it or gets an access to it, you're touching on a whole bunch of information that's there. But I just see, if I think of areas where AI can improve, everybody looks at AI improving, the enterprise. I being from an end user experience perspective, right? My end user experiences that we focus on are the end users of the enterprise, meaning the people who work for the company. To me, AI's next step should be, how do I improve the experience of clients' end user experience? So that user experience for end users to the B2C should be an area that AI can improve vastly. And
Yeah.
it's not quite there yet. There's little pieces and lights here and there, but that's an area that I just see opportunity.
Wow, Henry, I think we've discussed a lot of things, lots of relevant things. I think the future for new technologies and digital transformation is bright, but of course, there's a lot of things that have to be in place in order for that to be actually successful and adopted everywhere. I really want to thank you, Henry, for the conversation.
Yeah.
If there is someone listening and would want to know more about you, or want to speak to you, or want to know more about Flexxible, where can they best find you?
I say the best place to find me, I'll put it in the chat here, is probably my LinkedIn profile. Oh, I can't do the chat.
I will make sure I share that as well in the description so people can find it.
I'll try to. I think I have it right here to put on. There we go. Find me on LinkedIn. And from there, they can just message me, and instead of sending out my Flexxible email and having to write all that stuff out, you can post all those too as well. But I'd say find me on LinkedIn. I'm open and available to simply get out there and connect. And I'm pretty easy to find. Just type my name in. I think I'm going to pop up pretty quickly. Maybe you find my dad. I happen to be the third. So my dad's in there as a junior, but he's not. He's retired, been retired for decades. So he won't probably pop up on the top of that food chain. So.
Perfect. I'll make sure that people can easily find you. Thank you again, Henry, for the great conversation. And good luck with everything that you're doing.
Thank you, Jasper. Thanks for the time, by the way. This was a really fun time discussing this. I don't always get the ability to kind of go off the cuff and talk like this, and I appreciate it. Sorry I talk so much.
Thank you. No, that's what I like, and I actually learned a lot of more things myself from the conversation, though. So that's always nice.
Great.
Thanks.
All right. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for your time.
You
Cheers.
too.